what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Aloha America, welcome to our show today, and it is Wednesday, December 6, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And boy, I got to tell you, what a horrible news day it is. We'll get into that in just a little tiny bit. It's rather ironic timing when you realize that Israel is in the news, because earlier today, Donald Trump went ahead and did it. He threw a lit match into a tanker of gasoline by declaring that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and they will move the U.S. embassy there. This has drawn immediate condemnation from around the world, from everybody except, of course, Israel. And, of course, Trump supporters in this country, the Jewish Americans and the Christian Zionists, they all think it's a good thing, especially the Christian Zionists, because it's one step closer to the war of Armageddon, and the world will be destroyed, and then Jesus is going to come on down and invite us all up to the big house. So this is a good thing. It's a real good thing here. But this has really, it's a very dangerous thing that he just did. Trump has basically declared war in the Middle East, according to a top Palestinian diplomat. More importantly than that, the U.S. government for decades has maintained the position of mediator and objective negotiator between Israeli interests and Arab interests, and Donald Trump just abdicated that role. So right now there is no mediator in the Middle East working towards a peace plan. The peace plan between Israel and Palestine is dead. The two-state solution is now dead. And that leaves only one other alternative. And this is angering a lot of people. It's angering the more moderate Christians. It's angering the Muslims. It was a reckless thing for him to do. This gets back to what I was saying last year during the campaign, that Donald Trump was coming into the White House as dangerously naive about politics as Jimmy Carter, because there was a reason all these previous presidents resisted doing this, despite the entreaties and pressure coming from Israel and AIPAC and their Jewish financial supporters. There was a very good reason, because it could inflame the entire Middle East in a war. Unless that's what Trump wants, for the entire Middle East to go up in flames, along with the oil, this was a very reckless and dangerous thing for him to do. Now, Palestinians have declared 3 days of rage across the West Bank. The Arab world is completely outraged. Over in Iran, their premier is telling EU diplomats that change in Jerusalem status heightens tensions. It's making the region much more prone to war. And they're absolutely right about that. Now, over in Kuwait, they're saying that Palestinians have the right to sovereignty over Jerusalem, or at least East Jerusalem, because that was given to them by the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has passed numerous resolutions declaring that Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. Jerusalem is a shared city. So along with angering the rest of the world, Donald Trump has basically defied the United Nations to do this. Iran and Turkey have both sent messages saying that Al-Quds, which is the other name for Jerusalem, is an inseparable part of Palestine, at least East Jerusalem, but we've seen how Israel's been trying to capture more and more of that. Now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is set to meet in Turkey to coordinate a response to Donald Trump's declaration of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Now, he didn't actually declare it. He simply recognized it. Israel's been saying it's our capital for a very, very long time, and every time they do, they get slapped down again by the United Nations. Russia is very concerned over what is about to happen now that the U.S. is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Even Reform Jews are saying this was not a good idea, that this basically is bringing to an end any possibility of a peaceful revolution to the crisis over there. Now, the reality is that both the Palestinians and Israelis claim Jerusalem as their capital. But you need to remember, before Palestine was chopped up to create the modern Israel, Jerusalem was the capital of Palestine. And that's why the United Nations said everybody's going to have to share it. It's a very important city to all these religions. But Israel doesn't want to share. And it's come on out, apparently, story in the Times of Israel, how Netanyahu and his aides were active partners in getting Trump to go along with this recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And apparently Trump was also being spurred on by his biggest campaign contributor, billionaire casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, who was pushing on him to do that as well. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hello, Mike. This is Tony. Yeah. Listen, I'm happy Trump is doing what he's doing. Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel because it's about time that the third temple, Jewish temple, be rebuilt. But that's not why I'm calling.
I'd like to respond to that. I'd like to respond to that. Let me respond to that, okay? First of all, the site that's considered the temple today isn't really where the first temple was built. It was actually located on Mount Moriah, which is slightly to the southeast, and even Israeli archaeologists are saying what they're claiming is the remains of Herod's second and third temple, because there's already been a third temple, is actually the foundations of a Roman fort, Fort Antonio. And the way it goes is the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, then they built a second temple, and then Herod built a third temple, which, because the Messiah didn't show up, they went back and said, well, it was really just a renovation. But it wasn't. It was a complete from-the-ground rebuild. So there's a lot of mythology here that really doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny.
Okay. Now, my original comment is this. In regards to the History Channel, do you think the History Channel is the real deal or just part of the mainstream media?
Some of their programs are very good and accurate, and some of them, yes, are propaganda, and that's true for virtually all of the so-called educational channels.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, again, the United Nations Partition Plan declared Jerusalem to be a shared city among the major religions that hold it sacred. And all those other religions were willing to share. It's only Israel that says, we want it all. You're not allowed to come here. And yes, there is an agenda to tear down the Muslim temples, icons on the top of that platform of the Roman fort, and build a third temple. But this is all of this predictions and everything. This is fairy tale stuff coming from Bronze Age shepherds who wrote it all down. And that is really a very weak basis for formulating national policy, especially in the age of nuclear weapons. Anyway, there's another article over here that came on out about what was behind Trump's embassy move. And basically, Trump was talking about a desire to strike the ultimate deal between Israelis and Palestinians, but relocating the embassy, Washington's not going to be able to play an honest broker in future talks. The U.S. has ended its role as mediator and peacemaker in the Middle East. And that is just the real upshot of it all, because Jerusalem is going to stay Jerusalem, the Palestinians are still going to be there, the Muslims are still going to be there. All this really did is it angered everybody against each other. And it basically took the United States out of that process. Now, I'm willing to bet a nickel here. We're going to see Putin go on down there and try and calm things down. It's going to be very, very difficult to do, because all of the Arab nations, except for Saudi Arabia, which is clearly on board with the U.S. and Israeli agenda, but all those nations are now talking about uniting, and uniting with Palestine, which is exactly what Israel, we think, would like to avoid. Now, apparently the Palestinian mission in Washington was planning to have a Christmas party on Capitol Hill. And now that Donald Trump has recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, they've canceled that They figure it's kind of a lost cause. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers have voted to suspend aid to the Palestinian Authority unless they halt payments to the families of Palestinians detained or killed by Israel. So they're just tightening the screws. And it's very obvious at this point that the United States is not objective and unbiased in the issue between Israel and Palestine. It's very obvious that the United States has been totally co-opted by the government of Israel, and everybody around the world just got to see it. And frankly, I was very disgusted with Donald Trump, where he's out there talking about, well, you know, this is the only democracy in the Middle East, which is nonsense. A lot of those countries used to have fair elections until they got bombed by the United States. Now, France has come out of left field with an interesting suggestion. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But basically, the ambassador of Palestine to France, Salman al-Harfi, has said the French government has expressed a desire to recognize Palestine along those original borders, but it has to be part of the European Union to do that. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Palestine is a long ways away from the Union, but again, the EU is more economic than anything else. But that's an idea that the French are floating here. Meanwhile, Israel is already back to whining because apparently up at the European Union embassy, they were planning to host a photo gallery about how Palestinians have suffered under Israeli occupation. And the exhibition was titled 50 Years, 50 Portraits of Palestinians Born in 1967. And it was funded by Israeli rights group B'Tselem. And it was supposed to open in the city of Jaffa tomorrow. And the foreign ministry spokesman, Emmanuel Nachshon, basically came on out and said, it's patronizing attitude of the EU's hypocritical moral preaching, which creates distance rather than closeness. And basically came on out and said, yeah, this is incitement, this is incitement. Well, the reality is Israel has been doing all these things, and they want to go on doing all these things. They just don't want anybody to document it or talk about it. They love that word anti-defamation. Doesn't mean bad things did not happen, just that you're not allowed to talk about it. And you really ought to read up on the history of just how the Anti-Defamation League came into existence. It will open your eyes as to what their job really is. Now then, apparently, getting into domestic politics, another Mueller deputy has been caught sending anti-Trump messages. And apparently this top prosecutor told one of the Obama holdovers who refused to defend the travel ban, oh, I'm so proud of you, I'm in awe. And so apparently this is a major problem. Mueller's staff are clearly biased. Now, interestingly enough, a former judge has come on out and said that if General Michael Flynn was not aware that Strzok was removed for bias, the entire case against him for perjury can be dismissed under what's called a Giglio violation. This goes back to a United States Supreme Court decision in which the fact that a witness was biased, or the fact that, in this case, an investigator is biased, was not conveyed to the defense counsel, invalidated the entire trial. So they may just have shot their own perjury case down after how many months and $7 million. Mueller's come up with absolutely nothing. Now, Chuck Grassley is demanding the FBI produce all of the text messages sent by Peter Strzok and to his mistress as part of this investigation of an anti-Trump bias within the Mueller Special Counsel office, and they're certainly going to find it. So this situation is really heating up. And more interestingly, the House Intelligence Committee is getting ready to start writing a contempt resolution for top FBI and Justice Department officials who stalled in terms of explaining why Peter Strzok was removed from the special counsel's Russia probe. Everybody knew he'd been removed, but they weren't saying why. The committee asked months ago what was going on. and they never got an answer. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials here. We have a caller waiting on the line when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. It's time to grab your paper and pencil here, because if you would like to keep Republic Broadcasting and What Really Happened on the air, here's the address where you can send in your support. Check, money order, box tops, treasure maps, anything that you have there. The address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Or if you want to phone in a donation with a credit card or debit card, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And I got to tell you, we really need you to pitch in and help, or we're going to have to sell John Stedmiller for medical experiments. That's how desperate we are right now. Break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there has been more fallout from this Agent Peter Strzok because of the fact that he was dismissed for bias. That was withheld from Flynn's defense lawyers, which may, in fact, undermine the legitimacy of the entire case. But he was also one of the FBI agents who interrogated Hillary over the email server. He didn't put her under oath. He's the same guy who took that fake Trump dossier that the Democrats paid for and used it to open the bogus investigation into Trump. That FISA warrant that they claim legitimizes everything they did is absolutely worthless because it's based on false information. So now it looks like there are some representatives in Congress that are starting to get a little bit of spine. And they're saying it's time to start investigating the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. And I wholeheartedly agree. Because if I am correct, and Hillary was replaying the 1994 Chinagate gambit, then she was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And prior to her losing the election, a significant portion of the funds coming into the Clinton Foundation came from foreign sources. Now, a retired CIA officer reportedly working with Blackwater founder Eric Prince to sell the White House on this idea of a privatized global spy network, which unfortunately they've already brought Oliver North into it, which means the narcocracy is already being protected. But apparently he is claiming that National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster worked with the NSA to perform the surveillance on Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Steve Bannon, and others. This is in a report out of The Intercept. And if these revelations are true, and there's no reason to doubt them, this is a bombshell report, and Trump should fire McMasters as quickly as possible. Because McMasters has obviously been working against Donald Trump. As I said before, the hard part about trying to drain that swamp is the only ones showing up at the employment line are with the water moccasins and the alligators. Now, Hillary is still out there making personal appearances. She's out there trying to promote her image, sell her book. And Linda Tripp basically came on out and said, it's time to really point out what's really been going on. And she was on Daily Mail TV and basically said that Hillary Clinton is a destroyer of women should they get in her way. And she talks about all the lives. And by the way, it's not just women. It's also us guys who won't stay silent about Vince Foster. But destroyed all the women who leveled accusations against Bill Clinton, some of which ultimately turned out to be true. And apparently Hillary fed off Bill Clinton's power when he was president. She really is redefining what the phrase power mad bitch really means. And in another way to get her face in front of everybody, and you're going to love this, okay, there is a company that now has, just in time for Christmas, produced a 3D printed treetop angel of Hillary Clinton. It's around $140. and it's being marketed under the slogan, "A woman to look up to." So you're going to have your Christmas tree with all the stuff, and there on the very point is going to be Hillary Clinton. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't buy the Hillary angel for your tree because they keep falling over. Now, once again, Democrats attempted to bring impeachment charges against Trump, and they promptly got shot down by an overwhelming majority of the House of Representatives. There wasn't anything there. The legitimate purpose of impeachment is to remove a president who has provably committed a high crime or misdemeanor. You can't just impeach the president because you're upset that he beat your candidate last year. Now, everybody's been talking about Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And apparently in their online poll, somehow, Crown Prince bin Salman was the leader, well and away. A lot of people are suspecting that there were hackers who were trying to run up his number to get him on the face. And ultimately it turned out, though, that Time's Person of the Year is actually persons, and they're called the Silence Breakers. And these are these people who came forward and started blowing the whistle about Harvey Weinstein and these various politicians. And again, the rationale for Time's Person of the Year is who really significantly changed things. And yeah, there's absolutely no question these people stirred up the pot in a really, really huge way. All right, so it's time for us to get on over into the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Apparently over in Syria, the Tiger forces have reached al-Bakamal, and on the same day, 6 Russian Tu-22 M3 strategic bombers carried out a massive strike on ISIS positions near al-Sayal, destroying weapons depots, strong points, and concentrations of ISIS members. Now, the Syrian Arab Army and its allies continue their advance towards Sayal, and according to pro-government sources, they even reached positions of the SAA near al-Bakamal. So it's really going very well for the government of Syria, and the U.S. is still struggling to find some way that they can justify staying in Syria, even though the government of Syria would like them to go, and even though probably most Americans are saying it's time to come home. But I think what the U.S. is investing all this money and lives in is not that they think they still have a way to defeat Bashar al-Assad and take over. They just don't want to admit that they lost. So as long as they stay in Syria, they can walk around and say, no, we haven't lost, we're still here, everything's just fine. Same thing in Afghanistan, same thing in Iraq. Because if you go back and you look at the history of Vietnam, when that war was over and the U.S. had been well and truly defeated, got their hide whipped, there was actually a very long interval after that before the U.S. government got into any more overt conflicts in other countries, because the American people just weren't supporting it. We just lost a war. We didn't want to get into another one. Now, as you know, over in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been ranting and raving about Iran and how bad they are, and they're the new Nazi Germany, and they want to kill all the Jews, blah, 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 blah. And Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is accusing Netanyahu of fake history over his comment that Iran has sought the annihilation of the Jews just as had ancient Persia. And those are absolute lies, and you need look no further than Jewish scripture. The book of Esther tells of how Xerxes I saved Jews from a plot hatched by Haman the Agagite, which is basically part of the Purim holiday. Jews see Queen Esther as the heroine of Purim for talking Persian king Ahasuerus out of killing all the Jews in the kingdom, as his viceroy had convinced him to do. Zarif in the text also credited Cyrus the Great, who he called an Iranian king, with saving the Jews during their exile in Babylon. And don't forget, during World War II, Iran gave sanctuary to Jews who were fleeing the slaughter in Europe. So, all right, we're going to start taking phone calls here. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Quick, that last comment about Iraq is like almost, controlled by the Jews. I mean, the community there, our equivalent Secretary of Commerce in Iran is Jewish. I mean, that's all crap. But what I want to talk about, Mike, is Trump and his moving the embassy hasn't anything to do about he expects anything in return. He's just paying back the Jews that bailed him out of bankruptcy in the early days in New York with all the casinos and the hotels and everything that he got his hands into, probably with mafia money. So he's not expecting anything in return. He was vaulted into the presidency to pay them back. Now, whether this is going to cause world tension to start getting out of control, I doubt it. It'll probably blow over in another month or so. But I just wanted to make that comment. So as far as Iran goes, I don't know why. It's just a convenient way to, tell the people that are, that grew up on video games, this is, a threat to Israel. But anybody that knows anything about that country of Iran, it's all lies, been lies for 25 years.
Yes. Israel has been claiming for going on 30 years that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear weapon. And they just keep pushing this lie out there. And you have to go back and look at the real history. Iran is not a warlike nation. It's been 200 years since Iran initiated a war of conquest against another country. And that's a record, obviously, that neither Israel nor the United States can match. They can't seem to go 6 months without proving how butch they are by dropping bombs on somebody.
Well, they complain and get worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Maybe it's because they don't have them for themselves. Maybe they're just fooling everybody and making you think they have nuclear weapons. It's much cheaper and easier to handle.
Well, I seriously doubt that, because we know that they acquired the materials necessary to build a bomb from what was called the NUMEC scandal here in the United States of America. And when the former apartheid government of South Africa fell and the new government came on in, they uncovered paperwork that showed that Israel was not only helping South Africa try and develop their own nuclear warhead, but at one point they offered to sell one of Israel's nuclear weapons to South Africa. Now, the paperwork seems to indicate the deal didn't go through to completion. But obviously, if you're selling a nuclear weapon to another country, it's going to be a real operating nuclear weapon. And don't forget what came on out with Mordecai Vanunu, where he basically worked in that bomb factory hidden under the Dimona reactor, and he took all the pictures which were published in the Western press, for which Israel has continued to whoop on him ever since. No, I think Israel really does have nuclear weapons. They maintain the policy of nuclear ambiguity because they know that under United States law, they cannot receive any financial aid from the American taxpayer as long as they have nuclear weapons but refuse to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or allow IAEA inspections.
Can I comment on what you just said?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the Mordecai Vanunu thing is a hoax. I mean, the Jews have killed people for a lot less than that. I mean, they wanted him to do that to make people think they have the nukes. And if they do have nukes, they're probably going to be duds. And if you drop a dud, you're going to really get crushed. I mean, there's 300 million Arabs, surrounding them. You can't afford to be dropping duds anywhere. So, okay, well, all right, Mike, thanks for taking my call.
All right, well, I think Israel certainly acts like it's got the nuclear weapons and that nobody dares invade them. Could it be a bluff? Who knows? Israel's lied about so many other things. I tend to think that, yes, given the situation with NUMEC, the fact that there is a working factory capable of making bombs underneath Dimona, and that's not just from Mordecai Vanunu. Even Israeli TV actually did a documentary going on down there and saying, yeah, this is where we make the bombs. All right, let's take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, I think you just made a mistake before about Syria, saying that the United States lost. The United States actually won. The American people won. Who lost is this evil, wicked, globalist government, or at least elements of it, has taken over this country. And you see examples of it with the FBI, the CIA, and all these crooks now that they're, finally people are starting to look at and say, that they were, they're acting like police states. They are acting like police states. So I don't think the United States, I think the American people actually won Syria. Thank God Assad overcome these terrorists who, unfortunately, the United States and Israel and Saudi Arabia actually supported, maybe Turkey also.
Yes.
So that. Wouldn't you say that's the case?
Well,
in reality,
it's one way of looking at it, but I tend to look at the issue from the point of view of the average American who's just sick and tired of war. They have a very simplistic way of looking at the war and saying, we're in Syria, we're trying to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we're trying to get Bashar al-Assad. If the U.S. gets kicked out, to most people it's going to look like a military defeat. And again, that would pull the rug out from under the momentum the U.S. has tried to build up, attacking all these other countries. And they still haven't managed to start hostilities against Iran. But at the point where it's obvious that we've lost in Syria, that we pretty much are just hanging on in Afghanistan, I think the American people are going to start saying, it's time to call this off. It has bled this nation dry economically. Our infrastructure is rotting on the vine from neglect, and we really cannot sustain this war economy much longer.
Right. Say, did that guy just say before that Iran actually has a Jewish minister or something?
Yeah, there are Jews in the Iranian government. I mean, if Iran was this evil entity that wanted to kill Jews, they would start with the Jews that live inside their country. And by the way, many of those are the descendants of the Jews that were given sanctuary when they fled what was going on in Europe. One of the world's oldest continuously operating synagogues is in Iran. Some years ago, trying to reverse that demographic problem that Israel is dealing with, they attempted to lure the Iranian Jews back to Israel with very generous financial incentives. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we've lived here all of our lives. All of our friends are here. We've got businesses. We've got homes. And no, we don't need to move down to Israel and deal with all the nasty stuff that's going on down there. And it was a huge embarrassment for the government of Israel.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you think is going to happen now with this? I think Trump is making a mistake what he did today with Jerusalem, but all the neocons and even the conservatives, so-called conservatives. I say so-called because it mixes neocons, and all the others are saying what a great thing this is. What do you think? Do you think this is going to start another war, or do you think this is just going to be going to blow over? It really doesn't really mean much. It's just like what do you call it again?
Well,
it's just facade.
I'd like it to blow over, to be very honest. I don't think it's going to start a war. I could be wrong on that one as well. I think it is very possible that we are going to see clashes between Muslims and Christians in all of these countries in Europe that have been flooded with these refugees, and even here in the United States of America. Now, as far as what Trump has actually done, as I mentioned earlier in the show, he has basically yanked the United States out of its presumed role as arbiter of peace in the Middle East. And now there is no peacemaker in there, and that's why war is definitely much more possible. Anyway, Mark, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Don in the Philippines. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I just wanted to see if I could get through because it's an 800 number. I'm in the Philippines, but I was surprised that I got right through. But, yeah, as far as Trump, with this Jerusalem, that was one of his promises, I believe. One of his campaign promises was that he was going to restore the capital to Jerusalem. But I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't know why. The whole idea of Israel, in my opinion, Israel has no right to exist. It'd be like the Manhattan Indians. There was an Indian tribe, the Manhattan Indians. They'd all of a sudden demand Manhattan Island in New York City.
Well, the problem is the Jews who are living in Israel right now are not even the descendants of the biblical Hebrews. The majority of Jews living in Israel are Ashkenazis, who are actually descended from Central Asian Khazars who converted to Judaism in 800 AD. Now, that would be like me converting to some Native American religion and then start demanding a chunk of the United States be turned over because we were here first. I mean, that is how thin that entire argument is.
It's not right. I mean, I don't know what eventually is going to happen, but even if they do exist, there's even less rationale for the United States to strain every fiber of its being to try to pump up Israel and give Israel money. I mean, if they can exist on their own, then maybe they can go ahead and make a go of it. But anyway,
they've got a very healthy economy. They've got a very strong economy. They don't need our money. They just want it. And unfortunately, we have all of these dual nationals who are in our government in key positions of power, and we have this organization called AIPAC that is literally engineering a Congress that will basically bow to whatever it is that Israel wants. We're an occupied nation. We have a puppet government in Washington, D.C., or if you want to call it that, a Vichy government in Washington, D.C., ruling this country for the benefit of a foreign power. And it's time we all realize that's what's been going on. And we should be very angry and upset. The people of Iraq didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Libya didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Yemen didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Afghanistan didn't like living under a puppet regime. Why should we be any more accepting of that condition of life than these other people?
We shouldn't. And also Trump, when I voted for him, I thought he was going to be a real strong man, a tough guy. And here he is basically being bossed around by his son-in-law, looks like. Yeah,
that's very obvious, and his son-in-law definitely is pro-Israel, and unfortunately, again, we're seeing world politics being shaped by this religious belief, that goes back, as I said again, to the time of the Bronze Age. It is totally out of touch with our realities. Anyway, Don, we've got to let you go and take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and let's get back into the news here. Now, prior to the assassination of former President of Yemen, Saleh, the general consensus of opinion was that Saudi Arabia had gotten tired, they were worn out, they were about ready to throw in the towel. Saleh was climbing in popularity and influence in the country once again. And then, of course, he was killed, and nobody's really still sure who did it. The Houthis are getting the blame. But ever since Saleh's death, the Saudi coalition has greatly intensified airstrikes against Yemen. And they did dozens of airstrikes in positions of the Houthi Ansarallah movement in Sana'a and northern provinces yesterday, despite calls for a humanitarian ceasefire in the country. And the coalition also bombed the presidential palace, Saleh's residence, and houses of his family members. And that right there is reason to suspect that Saleh wasn't necessarily killed by the Houthis, who he'd been supportive and working with up until quite recently. Now, over in Ukraine, we might be about to see something dramatic happen there because Pravy sector radicals have given Petro Poroshenko a 72-hour ultimatum that he stop all the lawlessness in the country, or the ATO will come to Kiev, and ATO is the zone of anti-terrorist operation, as the Kiev authorities call the civil war against Donbass. So Donbass has been playing defense, just holding on to their territory, but apparently they've given Poroshenko this 72-hour ultimatum. If you don't stop this, if you don't stop attacking us, we're going to start attacking you. Going to go on the offensive. And that may be a significant threat, because there was this other story that came out of FortRuss.com on how Americans are practicing how to evacuate Poroshenko from Ukraine. And they took 2 of these Ka-27 helicopters, and they're basically flying them on in, practicing the route, and verifying that they can land on the deck of an American ship. So we may be seeing something dramatic about to happen there. Meanwhile, the U.S. is sending B-1B Lancer bombers to South Korea to take part in this week-long joint military exercise following Pyongyang's latest missile test. and it's an unspecified number of the long-range bombers. Maybe they figured they'd better get them on over there because the F-22s and the F-35s were not looking really good in actual service. If you will remember, F-22 lost power, did get back to the air base, had to be towed off the runway. And yesterday an F-35 was literally losing pieces out of the fuselage in flight, which tells you it probably would not do very well when it's actually being fired upon. Now, the corporate media has come out with this report that North Korea's last missile test was a failure because the reentry cone broke up on impact with the atmosphere. And it may be that somebody over there who's ever analyzing this doesn't really understand orbital reentry, or they just hope that you don't. Because the way a nuclear missile is designed to work is to follow a very shallow path just out of the atmosphere into the vacuum of space, and then a gradual reentry into the atmosphere, like a returning Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo spacecraft, and then deploy for the targets. Now, the test missile, just to test the engine, went straight up 2,800 miles and then came straight back down, which meant it slammed into the atmosphere like it was a brick wall. Remember all the talk about when they were trying to get Apollo 13 back to the Earth, and they had to hit this just right corridor? Because if they came in too steep, they would burn up. And that may be what happened. And maybe the North Koreans weren't expecting this thing to survive a direct head-on impact to the atmosphere. In fact, that weapons cone may have just been, an empty shell. But I don't think you can look at that and say that this was necessarily a failure. It's what you would expect in a test that goes straight up and straight down. All right, let's take some phone calls here. We're going to go to Frank in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, very good. With this moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we don't have an American Middle East policy. We have an Israeli Middle East policy.
Yes.
And President Trump,
since 9/11.
Especially, right. And President Trump is really a disappointment because for whose benefit is to move this embassy? It doesn't benefit the American people. No. It's just going to cause more unrest. It's going to cause us to get into another $1 trillion foreign entanglement in the Middle East by the time everything is all said and done. And if you wonder why, Michael, if you wonder why China is building super cities for their people and Japan is building monorails that go up to 200 miles an hour, because they're not involved in foreign entanglements like we are. They're taking care of their people's business, and that is true. China is building super cities.
Yes.
And Japan has one of the best mass monorail systems, even tops Europe.
Yes.
So if you want to think about this in layman's terms, what we spent on the Iraq War, and that was basically to benefit Israel, without a doubt. What we spent on the Iraq War, we could have paid off every single student loan debt in the United States of America. But we don't do that for our people. We get involved in these foreign entanglements, and what it does is it bleeds this nation, our treasury, and our people. And Trump was very, very much a disappointment.
Yes.
Because he should leave it alone. They got to learn how to work out their own problems. We have this country, and these kids are graduating with student loan debt that is amassed, would take years to pay off. And in addition to that, we have crumbling highways, infrastructure. My goodness, look around, people, what this country has become since I was a kid in the 50s.
Yes.
We are going down, and it's because we keep on getting involved with these Middle East foreign entanglements on the benefit of a very few handful of people. And that's what I got to say, Michael.
Well, there's another aspect that most people don't really talk about, and that is the fact that given that Israel does have nuclear weapons, they can use them as a threat against much of the world. Not directly, but what they could do is nuke the Middle East oil fields and leave them so radioactive they can't be used anymore, and that would collapse the oil-based economy around the world. And I think it was Ariel Sharon used to joke about how the Arabs may have all the oil, but we've got the matches. And so there's the implied threat there. You do what Israel wants, or we'll burn up all the oil.
Right, you're right with that. But I tell you what, there's a young man. His name is Elon Musk.
Yes.
He's doing wonders with this company called Tesla, and one day we're going to be off this foreign oil. And this is what's, you're right, it brings it down. But I'm just saying, Japan is oil, needs oil, and so does China, but they are taking care of their people, Michael, way better than we ever did, for the last 20 years.
Yes.
We get involved. Just think from the first Gulf War on, 1991 on, it's a never-ending Middle East conflicts. This nonsense in Syria now, we got to worry about Iran and Iraq and this. It's bleeding our treasury, and we got to be, as a people, to say enough's enough.
There's nothing in the Treasury. What we're doing is we're building up more debt to the private central bank, which the private central bank really likes. But we've been living in a wartime economy now for 2 decades. They don't want to admit it, but that's the reality. And again, look at the decayed infrastructure, the massive homelessness, the massive unemployment, the fact that the government lies about the unemployment and the rate of inflation. Go down the streets of your nearby town, look at all the retail vacancies. This nation is dying on the vine, and it's being bled dry for the war machine. And still there's money to keep giving more money to Israel all the time, because Israel's got a hammerlock on the U.S. government through Zionim, who are in positions of influence, through politicians they control, either through contribution or direct blackmail. And it really is a scandal. And I don't see how this country is going to be able to survive this government is going to be able to survive much longer.
You're absolutely right, Michael. But what we need to do is you need to be speaking to 50 million people instead of 500,000, because you got to wake up the American people. I'm awake.
Doing my best.
A lot of these RBN listeners are awake.
Doing my best.
But I pass you on your information on everybody I see, Michael. But bless you for all the work you do, and keep up the good work. You stand with the righteous. You are righteous in what you say, Michael, and that's the truth.
Thank you very much for those kind words. We're going to let you go and do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to go back to the telephones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, you can't save everybody in the country. So for those who are awake, got to stay prepared. Don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. But, yeah, hey, Mike, I know you know this, but in 3 years, the Chinese use more concrete than we use in 100 years. And in 6 years, they use more concrete than in our lifetime. They got the world's fastest train system.
Yes.
They got brand new infrastructure, brand new highways. They're modernized. We're not. That tells you everything you need to know what's going on. We're a war machine, and we're in decline. And we said this before over and over. And my God, Mike, it's amazing how people are focused on this. Russia did this, Russia did that. It's just everything's a diversion, because we're in a dying empire, and so is part of Europe, because that's part of the same empire. It's a shame how people just focus on minuscule things like Kim Kardashian and kneeling for the football, and it's all garbage, man. It's like get yourself prepared and protect your family, and you don't know when it's going to come, but it's going to come, because you can see it. The decline is already happening.
Oh, yeah, it's very obvious. Now, for very young people where this is all they've ever known, their lives, they don't see it. But for us older people, we've been watching the nation rot away for a very, very long time. A couple of footnotes I'd like to add to that. If I recall correctly, the current world's record holder for fastest supercomputer is in China, and China just completed the world's largest non-steerable radio telescope. And it dwarfs the one at Arecibo. Huge thing, absolutely huge.
That's the new empire, Mike. It's a fact. Eurasia is the new empire. That's why we fear Russia. It's part of the new empire. I know people don't want to hear it. It's a fact. We're in decline, but you can't save everybody in this country that don't want to listen. You got to get your own family and your own affairs in order. Mm-hmm. Protect yourself, your wife, your kids. And Mike, with Trump, with this moving, like, how does this make America great again? That's why I want to ask all the people who I voted for Trump, but the people who still support Trump, how does this make America great again? It has nothing to do with. This is about a small percentage of like Talmud worshipers. Like in Israel.
And I understand he did make this promise during his campaign, and it raised a little bit of concern. But it concerns me that this seems to be one of the few campaign promises he's actually carrying forward on. He promised no more foreign interventions. That promise was broken. He promised to put Hillary in jail. Nothing is being done. Either he totally bamboozled us all, or he's been totally compromised or threatened, or however it's come about. We did not get the Donald Trump we voted for. And yes, I'm just as disappointed as you are. And of course, probably would have been worse under Hillary. And that, I think, is really a statement about our current society, that every election is always trying to find out the lesser of two evils.
Mike, we're decadent, and Kenny Rogers had that song, when to hold and when to fold.
Yes.
I think it's time to fold Donald Trump because it's over for him. It's over for us.
He's a one-term president.
He's going to do anything.
He's probably going to survive all these attempts at impeachment and 25th Amendment. They may even take a shot at him, which I think would be a very destabilizing thing. But he's going to be a one-term president. He just blew off his chances in 2020. And I think that's why Hillary looks like she's already trying to maneuver the chessboard so she can take another run. Or in her case, a stagger toward the White House.
Yeah, like Stan said, Mike, it's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. And it's the same with the economy and everything. It's who controls everything. It's who writes the tax code, benefits from the tax code. When are people going to understand that?
Yes.
Like Goldman Sachs wrote it, they're going to benefit from it and their friends. You're not. You're paying more in taxes. And, if you want to get angry enough, go out on the street. Otherwise, you can't keep saying, well, Trump's doing this, doing that. He didn't do anything.
No,
hasn't done anything.
Just sitting back and coasting and allowing the same old machine to move forward. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here. So we're going to switch over to Sean in Ventura, California. And, Sean, what a horrible mess you people are having to suffer through with all these fires.
I'm zero right now. I could barely see across the street. The smoke is so thick, and it smells like a campfire throughout the entire city. And you can't even see the sun. Like, is absolutely brutal. And then I've had so many friends. Like, I'm safe where I'm at. I haven't been evacuated yet, but I've had so many friends, like refugees almost. Like, one of my friends was evacuated 3 times. Like, she literally, had to pack up her kids and her husband and, moved, 3 times over the course of, 4 hours. And then I had a neighbor come by just a minute ago, said that, so we've been out of electricity for a couple of hours, couple days, but we're apparently going to lose water. So we're going to be out of water for the next 2 or 3 days.
Now you understand why we preppers think the way that we do.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of the things I wanted to say real quickly, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I heard you mention the fires yesterday, and I've been listening to you for the last 7 years, by the way. And you always mention the fire break roads, but honestly, the ambers can fly once the Santa Ana, because you're familiar with Santa Barbara. So I've lived in Ventura for 3 years.
I used to live in Southern California, and I've seen the Santa Ana winds, and I've seen these fires get out of control.
Yeah, and the ambers can fly miles. So I don't really think the fire did hop the 33 and the 126 and the 101. So I don't really feel like the fire break, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really feel like the fire break roads really make that much of a difference.
Well, it's not just acting as fire breaks. It also gives the fire trucks additional access into those interior regions. So they do have to be kept open.
Yeah.
But I was watching the news this morning, and apparently the fire has reached as far east as the 405 freeway, which was shut down, and they were showing the fire's actually getting into the Bel Air area. And that's, where all the really rich people are living. Hef's place is in there, although Hef isn't anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was in Santa Barbara when Montecito burned down, and like Bill Murray, Oprah, like a whole bunch of people lost their houses.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember one time.
Okay, I don't want to take up much more of your time.
All right. Well, listen. Stay safe. Stay safe. If I would start bottling water while you still have water service, just to have it standing by here.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as I get off the phone, I'm going to head over to the water store.
All right. I think that's a very, very good idea. So quit wasting your time with me and get on over and get some emergency supplies set in.
Okay. Well, thank you to you and your listeners.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And I remember one of the summers that I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain, there were literally 3 wildfires on 3 different sides of the park, and they decided to shut it down and send all the guests home with rain checks. As part of the street theater, our job was to make sure everybody was getting out cheerfully, there's nothing to worry about. And it was just this weird experience to stand there in the middle of all this working amusement park equipment, nobody around, and this orange sky. I wish I had a camera at the time. It was just surreal. We'll be back after
this.
Actually,
it's a beautiful sunset. Okay,
yeah, we get those with our volcanoes. We'll be back after these few words. America, welcome back to the show, and yes, we definitely do need your support to keep Republic Broadcasting and What Really Happened on the air, and if we don't get the support, we're going to have to start taking our control room techs and putting them out on the street corners with really short skirts and a lot of lipstick. So we really do need your help here. So Japan is now getting ready for the possibility of an attack from North Korea. They're carrying out citywide evacuation tests. That's a major, major event if you look at some of those cities out there, and they're conducting similar drills in smaller cities as well, so they're getting ready. Now, Ron Paul has stepped forward, volunteering to be a peace envoy to North Korea for President Trump. The only problem being that Trump's administration, the war hawks, the neocons, they don't want peace. They need a major, major war on which to blame the rapidly declining U.S. economy. Because if there is no war, the economy continues on the way it's going, and I'm expecting after the Christmas rush is over and we start seeing major, major losses of retail stores and jobs, the American people are going to say, this is all the fault of Wall Street. This is all the fault of the Federal Reserve. It's all the fault of the Congress and the White House. And so one of the reasons to accelerate this war agenda and get something major going is so the government is going to be able to say, it's the war. We have to pay for the war. We're sorry, but, governing is choosing and governing is prioritizing. We're sorry that you people are going hungry and you're dying of easily cured illnesses because the Medicare payments have stopped, but we've got to go on out and give those evil people what for. It's all their fault that you're suffering. Don't blame us. We didn't do anything wrong. Now, we have been talking about the high cost, poor quality of America's weapons. I think those embarrassments over in South Korea illustrate that perfectly. F-22 lost power, got back to the airfield, had to be towed off. Pieces of the F-35 flying off while it's in flight. And this gets us back to one of the high-tech whiz-bang systems that the Navy has been developing. They've spent $500 million developing an electromagnetic rail gun, and it looked really impressive, and they developed a special projectile to go with it called a hypervelocity projectile. It was basically lighter in weight, so it could be accelerated much more rapidly. And somebody did some calculations and found out that using that same projectile that's lighter in weight, they could get the same velocities and range using conventional artillery. And so now there's talk of just canceling this entire project. And there's also the issue that the cycling rate, at least on the current test bed railgun, is nowhere near as rapid as that of naval artillery. So, getting into the economic news here, the dollar has suffered the worst year since 2003. And it's not looking like it's going to reverse course anytime soon. And apparently the word coming out of Washington via Bloomberg is that tax reform isn't about to save the dollar, where federal rate hikes have failed. One of the reasons the dollar is in trouble, along with the fact that it's being hyperinflated, is if other countries take in a dollar and they bring it back to the United States, what can they buy with it? Our manufactured goods are overpriced junk. Nobody wants those. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The dollar's real worth is not what it prices against gold or other currencies, but what you can actually trade it for. And if there's really nothing out there that you want to trade that dollar for, then the real value of that dollar is pretty much zero. And that's why so many of these other countries are turning to the ruble and the yuan and these other basket currencies, so forth and so on. Paul Craig Roberts has come up with a new name, a new phrase for what's going on in this country right now, and he calls it plunder capitalism. And basically he opposed the tax cut for the large corporations that passed Congress because it's got nothing to do with supply-side economics. The only purpose was to raise equity prices by providing equity owners with more capital gains and dividends. In other words, it's there to drive that stock market up so the government can use it as a propaganda banner. How can you say the economy's in trouble? Look, the Dow is pushing 45 million. I mean, that tells you how good our economy is, even as we have 100 million Americans chronically out of work. Now, there was an article over in Giza Death Star talking about the missing $21 trillion. And ever since Donald Rumsfeld had to take the podium at the Pentagon and admit that the Pentagon had misplaced $3 trillion, more and more people are trying to look and find out where's the money going. And the latest estimated number is that the U.S. government as a whole, including the Pentagon, have managed to misplace $21 trillion of your money. Nobody seems to know where it went, or nobody seems to want to say where it went. So apparently there's an economist over at the Michigan State University who says that despite his best efforts to find out where it went, all he's getting is obfuscation, buck passing, and missing links. And now the story has captured the attention of Greg Hunter, who's the financial commentator at USAWatchdog.com. And that's a legitimate question, because that wasn't the government's money they lost. That was your money. And just think of how much good $21 trillion could do to this country for its infrastructure, for its education. Maybe it's not missing. Maybe it simply got spent on unreported research and development for new weapons, the wonder weapons. But that's a lot of money to just have go walkabout. And if nothing else, it proves that the U.S. government is a bad manager. They can't manage themselves. Why should we let them manage us? Which makes a lot of common sense to me. Bloomberg's Matt Townsend is saying that America's retail apocalypse is only just now getting started, echoing my sentiment about what we're likely to see at the end of the holiday shopping season. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, China's central bank is warning Bitcoin will die. And we know that China has cracked down on the Bitcoin exchanges over there. And again, this may be concern that as a virtual currency, it can be manipulated wildly out of control, which seems to be what's going on right now. And of course, any central bank, they want their currency to be the currency everybody is using because they make money off of that. If people are using Bitcoin or Ether or any other cryptocurrency, the bankers aren't making a piece of the action off of that until they can take control of it and say, well, we're now loaning Bitcoins into circulation at interest, which is the essential scam of private central banking. So China is out there saying it's going to die. Bitcoin's value is continuing to climb. I did go ahead and take the recommendation of the caller the other day, and I did set up a Bitcoin link at whatreallyhappened.com, and so far we've raised 0.000004 Bitcoin. So we're off and running on our way to incredible wealth beyond the dreams of Midas. Looking over at the stock market, there is a growing concern that a car crash is coming, and it will be led by Tesla. And the reality for all the automakers is people just don't have the money to buy new cars. The conventional business model, planned obsolescence, was that a low-end car was designed to last just 5 years, and the luxury models for 8. The thinking was the original owner would keep it for 5, and then it would go into the pre-owned vehicle market. Used to call them used cars, now it's pre-owned. But people are keeping their cars much longer. We've kept this Honda for 18 years. We don't want to take out a car loan because we are not sure we can pay it. And that is a very common sentiment. So the car companies have been manufacturing cars. They're having to rent huge lots to keep the surplus. And again, if you look at the actual car commercials on the air right now, the deals are amazing. They can't move their product. And they're not going to be able to move their product, no matter how great their offers are, until we return to a system where the wealth accumulated at the top of our economic pyramid is recycled back down to the bottom in the form of decent wages and salaries that people can trade their labor and skills for, at which point they'll take that money and they'll go down to the car lot and they'll buy a new car, or they'll go to the shopping mall and they'll buy a new TV, or they'll pay down their credit card bills, or they'll buy a new home. But we have an entire economy that is just focused on finding ways to get more and more money out of the general population. But you can't take out what isn't in there in the first place. Okay, we got to do a station break here. When we come on back, we're going to have Dave Gahary and Phil Turney of Erasing the Liberty. We'll be right back.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.